Hello, I am Marilyn and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm just thrilled to be here. I know several of you, and it's always good to see you again. Thank you, Ken, for the invitation to come here. And congratulations on the fine shirt for our holiday today. And if you haven't seen that, it's spectacular. And I was up here for the whole weekend and spent the afternoon with Michael and friends, and Michael's here tonight. So thank you for your kindness. And then Debbie picked me up. I was up at the San Damiano Retreat Center, which is truly a beautiful place, and you're lucky to have it here. And we went out for coffee, and I just thought, I have died and gone to heaven. It's been such a lovely afternoon. And now it's wonderful to be here too. In the first part of the meeting, we read the steps, and it mentions that spiritual awakening, having had a spiritual awakening, the promise of a spiritual awakening. That's often talked about in spiritual books. And of course, that's our goal, to have this kind of life where we have some kind of contact with something higher, a higher power. And that was so beyond me. But there's an author that I like, Anthony DeMello, and he writes a lot about awakening, about waking up and spiritual awakenings. And there's one book about that, I think it is called Awareness, where he talks about a mother going in to talk to her son. And she says, "Wake up, son, time to get up." And he said, "Oh, let me sleep. I'm so sleepy. Go away." And so she goes away and comes back about 5 minutes later. "You have to get up, son. You have to get up now." He said, "I'm so sleepy. Why do I have to get up?" And she said, "Because it's time for school. And you're the headmaster." And I didn't start waking up until I was 32 years old. And I was asleep spiritually, certainly, and pretty much emotionally by the time that Alcoholics Anonymous began to take care of me. But in the beginning, I had great hope. I had always loved science, even as a tiny child, and I wanted to have an academic career. And I had a saintly mom who saved some money so I could go away to a good school and study science, and things were going well. But I always, as so many people that I hear in Alcoholics Anonymous talk about, I just felt so distant from everybody else. I was trying to make my own way in science, but I was always a stranger in a strange land around other people. I couldn't talk to them. I was just so inadequate. Somebody would say, "How are you?" And I would spend 20 minutes talking about my depression to them. And they'd go away in terror. And so it was so hopeless. And I just spent those years, but because of studying science, you can isolate pretty much. And I was doing that and studying. And I got to the place where an academic career was possible. I was given a lot of opportunities. I was taken into a laboratory and given a stipend, money, a salary, and a research project. It was a great lab with a wonderful director, a project to work on, and it would have led to a wonderful academic career. And I was so happy about that, but it was a selfish kind of thing. I want to make something of myself. I feel like I have to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Make your own way in this world. And I pretty much ignored everybody else because I was afraid of them. I didn't know how to talk to them. Even people there in the lab, there were about 50, it was a big lab, a lot of people, some from other countries. And so I kind of kept to myself. I didn't help other people. I didn't ask for help. And just thought, I'm at that place where I thought I'd be a happy person. I still wasn't happy. Just felt out of it. And science is hard and it requires discipline. And I was a little bit impatient and not happy with my work, not going well at all, not realizing that every good scientist goes through periods where it's just not working time and time again. But I was impatient. And then something began to take care of everything. And I'm not sure how it all began, but I know that there was one important thing, and that was a little bottle on the shelf, and that was 90% ethanol. That's a good drink. That's 180 proof, like vodka, just alcohol. And some of us began to experiment with that. And then we'd go out after a hard day of working on that ethanol. And they introduced me to bars. There were wonderful bars in Los Angeles. That's where I was. That's my home. Still is my home. And we would go out, and I just had such a good time. And I was always with people who drank a little bit less than I did. And they were often the one driving, so I would get back home. One night I was driving, and I pretty much got back from the bars, and there were still people in the car, and I was supposed to drop them off at various places, but it was going well. So I said, "This is fantastic. I made all the lights tonight." And somebody in the back said, "And a few of them were green." So I was a danger on the road. But it was still going well. And I was having that, it was so much more than a good time. It was that I began to feel comfortable with other people. I felt like I have a place. I feel like I'm a real scientist now. And I felt like I am doing super work. I mean, I could just see the headlines: Marilyn Slater, Nobel Prize winner. But the reality was that I was pretty much not working. I was drinking, but it gave me that wonderful illusion that all is going ever so well. And the director would check on me now and then, "How's it going?" And I would say, "Oh, so well, thank you, go away." And he would pretty much leave me alone. But at some point it got to that place where he wanted to see what I had been doing. And at that point, I leafed through my lab book, and I had written some limericks. There was a young man from Nantucket kind of thing, drawn some doodles of lab mice, and it just was not going to fly as a research project. And I kept looking, there must be something here. And in those days, I had no program. I had no guidance for proper living. None of the tools that we come to understand in Alcoholics Anonymous and incorporate into our lives. So what did I do? Now, had I been a sober alcoholic, if I had realized I am already a hopeless alcoholic way down that path and had gotten sober, I could have gone into the director's office and apologized and said, "I haven't done any work yet, but give me another chance. Or if not, how can I make up for squandering this opportunity?" Could have said things like that. What I did was I just went home and mailed the keys back a few weeks later. That was the best I could do because I knew that I was trapped. I don't have anything to show, and I've been reassuring people that I do have. And so that I felt was the end of that career. And I went home and began to give birth to little children. And that was pretty frightening to my husband. And I tried to be a good mom. There was one time in being a good mom that I do remember a lot of these years, and there were several of them, are blackouts, and I just vague memories of which child was it. But in being a good mom, there was an infant, a baby, and I was sitting, and there was a radio announcer, Paul Harvey, this old radio announcer. Gosh, some people are nodding. I'm sure that I'm the oldest person in the room. That surprised me. But anyway, so Paul Harvey was saying, alcoholics go downhill faster than men. There's usually about 10 years between that first drink and institution. I thought, I've got to turn off this horrible voice. And so I thought, I've got to get up and get to the radio in the middle of this talk. And so I said, I'm holding this baby. So to be a good mom, I put my hand on her little head and started, because I knew that I'd probably crash into walls as I got to the radio, because that's the way I lived. And that was the best I could do to be a good mom. Bill was, my husband, was frightened, and he tried to enlist the grandmas to come often so that there would be some adult there. And of course, they talked to me about my drinking, which was really very alcoholic by that time. And I was getting sicker and sicker. And my mother-in-law was very encouraging. She knew about Alcoholics Anonymous, and she would say things like to me, unless you get control of her life and stop drinking, we'll lock you up and you'll never see the children again. You know, encouragement. It scared me to death. And so I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was in January of 1969, but it's not my sobriety. And I didn't get a home group. I didn't get a sponsor. I did listen, but I did not relate to anything that I heard. I just felt uncomfortable. I wanted to drink, but I didn't drink as long as I was going to meetings. And I thought, this is not so hard. Somehow, by the power of this program, I was staying sober day after day after day, even though I was not taking steps, really not true member and participant of the fellowship. I was definitely a spectator. But that alone was enough so that I didn't drink, because I'm very subject to peer pressure. I want you to like me. Please, just like me. Like me. I'll do anything. I'll even not drink for a while, which is the ultimate. And I was not drinking. And so I thought, this is not hard. I don't have to go to these meetings anymore. So after 3 months, I left, and I thought, I better not drink. I might have a problem with alcohol. I sort of was in trouble before. The grandmas had gone home, and there I was. And pretty soon there were 3 little children, and I don't quite know how that all happened, but it did, and here they were, and I was taking care of them, and my husband was a scientist and working hard, so he'd go back to his lab every night, all day long, come home for a while, eat dinner, go back to the lab. And now I had these little children, and they needed food, and they needed bed and baths and stories and all of these things, and you have to do this stuff in the right order. It doesn't count. And oh my gosh, the pressure of it all. And I just thought, you know, if I could have just a couple of drinks, I could do this. And I had a couple of drinks and I could do it. It was wonderful. I could make a dinner for Bill and he went back to work. And that worked so well. I could have a couple more drinks and I could do baths and bed and story. And then I don't know quite what happened. It didn't take very long. But they say our disease progresses even when we're not drinking. And so I was very quickly back to the place where I had stopped before. And Bill came home one night and I was out. I'd gone out to get more to drink. And what I remember coming out of blackout, maybe unconscious, who knows, but him pulling the car door open, saying, "What is wrong with you? There is a child in the car and you're drunk. What is wrong with you?" And I got home, the front door was wide open and the baby was in her crib. And I thought about that and I thought, he's absolutely right. This is not right. And I had no explanation. I didn't know what to say. I don't know why I was out in the car at night with a child in the car. I didn't know any of those things. And I felt bad, of course, and went home. And then the grandmas came to take care of the children. And in February of 1972, I was done. And how did I know that I was done? Well, I didn't really know, but what I was doing was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. For a while, I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think, tomorrow I'm not going to have a drink. And now I was waking up at 3 and thinking, I am going to have a drink just to get through the day. And another drink, and I'm going to be in a blackout. And it's going to happen day after day, and I can't stop it, and I'll die of alcoholism and harm other people. And it's hopeless. And I had been to Alcoholics Anonymous, but this was true for me, and I've heard it from other people too, that a part of our insanity apparently is once I was in AA and left it and started drinking again, AA did not look good. It just looked like, as our book talks about, would you like to have a program of recovery and accept a spiritual solution or drink yourself to death? Well, I don't know. They both sound so bad. And, so I didn't turn myself into AA, but I called central office just to get somebody to talk to me. And usually when I did that, they would get off the phone in a hurry. Once they asked that one question, this inquiring mind, do you have a drinking problem? Do you want to stop drinking? And I would always say, no, I want somebody to talk to me. Please talk to me. And they'd say, we have to get off the phone. Yeah. But this day, this person stayed on the phone and talked to me. And then she said, do you have a drinking problem? Of course, I said no, but I need somebody to talk to me. I'm so lonely. I'm here with little children and I'm desperately lonely. Just talk to me. I'll talk to you. And we talked for a while. And then she said, have you had a drink today? And I, oh no, I don't. That's not my problem. I just need somebody to talk to me. And she said, we have a fellowship and we have talkers. And we'll send somebody to your house to talk to you and keep you company. Would you like that? And I mean, I'm a believer. And I said, yes, send a talker. And she did. It was Lorena. And she came. She was not like my mother-in-law. She didn't talk to me about alcohol that might interest me. She talked about alcohol in her life. And she told me her story. And it was just very much like that experience of Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson, where Dr. Bob thought, I'm not interested. I mean, so many people have come to see me about my drinking. Not another, please. All right, I'll see him for 15 minutes. And Bill Wilson came and talked about his drinking. He told his story. And I once heard various accounts of that, about how they just talked and talked for hours and hours and hours. I was at a retreat and Father Tom was doing the retreat and he talked about having met Smitty, the son of Dr. Bob, and he was there. And what surprised him was that he heard a lot of laughter and his dad hadn't laughed for a long time. But they laughed and spent hours. And Dr. Bob got sober and Lorena talked to me and talked to me. And then she said, I'm going to take you to a meeting. And she took me to my first real meeting where I became a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was February 8th, Debbie's birthday. Different year, but we both share February 8th as our birthday. And she took me to a dark, quiet meeting and I heard someone tell my story. There was a wonderful priest, Father Terry R. down in Los Angeles, that many, many times would remind us, identify, don't compare. And I was struck by the speaker, Marian, who told my story. Now, I don't know why I could hear that night and not before, but she did tell a story that was so much like my very own. And she talked about sponsorship and how important that was. And after her talk, I ran up and just kind of attached to her, like tick on dog attachment. Would you be my sponsor? Please, would you be my sponsor? And she said it would be a privilege. Now, where else can you go? Country club, PTA, walk up to a complete stranger and say, can you take control of my life? I might have to sleep on your couch. You need a lot of help. Please. They don't say it would be a privilege. What they say is, security. Except this one. But Marion became my sponsor, and she gave me a foundation. She introduced me to the Pacific Group, which is my home group to this day, down in Los Angeles, founded by Clancy, who many of you probably met because he traveled all over the world and talked to people. And many people came to believe that they were alcoholics by hearing his talk. It's a great benefactor in Alcoholics Anonymous, a wonderful member. And he, like my mother-in-law, scared me to death, though. He was a very strong personality. And yet, I was in the Pacific Group, and I had that buffer, Marion, a sponsor. And she just gave me the steps, she gave me the traditions. She encouraged me to talk to newcomers. I said, I don't know how to talk to people. They just ask strange questions like, how are you? What do you say if somebody asks you that? And she said, people don't want to know. Just say, fine, how are you? And I began to trust she had answers for my life. She also had this program of recovery that she led me into. And life got ever better. And it got so good that I actually went back to school and finished some work that I had left undone, made amends to the director of the lab, started making amends to family members, got a good job. Life was going so well that I began to worship those lesser gods, like my salary should be bigger, my job, I need a little bit better, more prestige, that kind of thing. And lesser gods lead to, of course, a lesser life. And Alcoholics Anonymous and my involvement was not technicolor anymore. It was kind of gray. And I wanted to know why. I'd taken a trip with my daughter to Israel, and I don't know why it happened in Israel, but often when higher power wants to intervene with humankind, it does it in Israel. I mean, it's 3 religions grew out of Israel. Now, nothing big like that happened to me, but I was standing with my daughter, kind of looking out over the Sea of Galilee, this historical setting. And I don't know why it came to me, but I realized that the happy people in Alcoholics Anonymous are the most involved, the most committed to the fellowship. And I had that realization, which was a gift from my higher power, whom I had come to know just by taking the steps. But I was forgetting my higher power, as I said, getting involved in the world again. And I just apologized and said, get me involved. And I thought it would be something like go to India and turn yourself over to Mother Teresa. But people in AA said it's not that hard. It's the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I realized I could go back to my home group, the Pacific Group, where all you have to do is show up at a meeting and you get involved. Do you have a commitment? Do you have a sponsor? I didn't have a sponsor at that time. I was depending on my friend Diana, and we were kind of sponsoring each other. I don't recommend that, but it's good to have a good friend. And she was always honest with me. So I'm sure that that's how I got through that period when I didn't have a sponsor. But now I was in the Pacific Group, and every day somebody, mostly Mary M, would come up to me and say, do you have a sponsor? And I would say, no, I have a friend. I'm doing just fine. And she said, thank you. Yes. And you need a sponsor. It needs to be Clancy. Oh, no, I'm afraid of Clancy. And then she'd come back, and she was visiting the place where I was working. frequently, and she would always come into my office and ask the same question. And one day I said, all right, give me his number. And I went down to see him at the Midnight Mission. And by that time, I had become super involved in the Pacific group again, going to a meeting every night, just like a newcomer without drinking, going to his yard to play horrible sports, team sports, and eating what they call the mystery meat luncheon, and all the activities. And I was getting happier and happier. Gray was turning into Technicolor again. And I had gone down to the Midnight Mission where Clancy worked, and I said, Mary M says you should be my sponsor. I don't have a sponsor. And he agreed to be my sponsor. And I said, what do you want me to do? And I was terrified at the answer. He said, well, do what you're doing. Just show up at our home group every week and keep doing what you're doing. You seem to be getting along okay. And I thought, it's that easy? But he was the perfect sponsor for that time. I've had 3 sponsors, and each has been perfect for that time in my sobriety. Marianne gave me that strong foundation, and I knew how AA works. I just need to work it. I need to be involved. But Clancy was that kind of example that I could never, ever approach and imitate. But on the other hand, it was that Chuck Chamberlain used to talk about the burr under the saddle. It was the thing that was always inspiring me to just do a little bit more. I mean, for example, one night I called up and I'd been asked to speak on a Friday night up in the mountains at Lake Arrowhead. I mean, drive across LA in traffic and drive up a mountain at night on Friday. And I said, Clancy, how could a secretary expect such a thing? I mean, I really don't have to do that. They could get somebody local up there, can't they? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, I probably would do it. And anyway, I don't have time to talk. I've got to catch a plane to Newfoundland. I'm going to do steps up there. And I thought, okay. That happened frequently enough that I just was nursed out of sloth so many times. I mean, that was one of my favorite character defects. And I just had these very, very good years. And there's a line in our book about avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. And I love that. And I used to do that, but after a while being involved, I was not making trouble for myself. I was enjoying life, but there was a knock on the door. When I was 40 years sober, misery came to me. And that was because our 3 children had grown up. They had very good lives, Becky, David, and Susie. And I was happy about that because I didn't have to worry about them anymore. And the 2 daughters were producing grandsons, and they were darling and wonderful. And David was a scientist like his dad and had a beautiful young wife. And everybody seemed to be happy. But Friday night, I was in Las Vegas, and there were phone calls from the family. And I was actually speaking, and when I got down from the podium, I checked it out. What's going on? Well, David didn't come home from work, and his wife was worried. And by about 11 o'clock that night, police had gone into his office and found that he had hanged himself. He committed suicide. And my world came to an end. That was a thing that I could not survive. I knew that. But by that time, I had Clancy as a sponsor, a strong sponsor. So when something like that happens, it's good to have an involved, strong sponsor who knows you pretty well. And I called him up, and he had the right words. He said, you have a program. You have 40 years of sobriety, and it will sustain you. And the program will keep you going. But now your job is to go home and make sure that you can extend that program to your family, that love and service. God, thank you. And that's what I did. I drove across the desert from Las Vegas, and Bill was shattered. And we began a 3-year process of deep grief. But with each day, it got a little bit lighter. And there was a wonderful person sponsored by my friend Diana, Julie, who had lost her son 10 years before. And she said, I hope that you can understand that you will get through this. And if you can accept it, you will find that there are many blessings that will come in the aftermath. And I thought, this is impossible. I could never feel blessed again. And I can't accept this. And she said, acceptance doesn't mean approval. It just means cooperation with reality. And there is an author I like, Elaine Padgel. She lost a young son. And she said that she learned that if you make that kind of thing the centerpiece of your life, it ruins your life. But if you're in denial and you don't recognize it and grieve it, it ruins your life. Either way, your life is ruined. So you have to go that middle course. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. It did not allow me to make it the centerpiece of my life. It just kept giving me stuff to do. And I was teaching at that time, and I was elected president of this place where I was teaching. It was a 2-year commitment. And I had to show up and do that. And I had to show up at my meetings. And I was sponsoring quite a few people. And they kept me going. And then after 60 days, I was able to go out and give a talk, tell about it. And that shared experience was so healing. Then the family began to recover. And as I said, after about 3 years, life almost got back to normal, but it will never be. It's a new normal, of course. And the open wound gradually seals up and becomes a scar. But there have been untold blessings. And the first one, I think, was just resilience, because there were losses to happen. About 6 years ago, my sweet Bill passed away. And we had a little over 60 years together. And they were good in the last 40 at least. And then a year later, Clancy passed away. And 2 weeks later, I was at one of Father Tom's retreats, and I've known him for a long time, Father Tom W. Met him through my friend, Father Terry, and he was giving a talk, and he said, thank you. You know, I'll pretty much sponsor anybody. They often don't call me, but I'll sponsor them. And I thought, oh my gosh, I need a sponsor. And he's just inviting anybody. I have to say yes. And he turns out to be the perfect person for this time in my sobriety. Before sobriety was still, I've got to do it. I've got to recover. I've got to help 1 million people. I've got to sponsor everybody in the world. I have to just be active. And his attitude, relax, breathe, and talks about joy. He often quotes Mary Oliver, instructions for life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. I spent the weekend at his retreat, this beautiful place, looking at trees, looking at flowers, taking time to do that. And your joy has entered my life at this time, and he is the perfect sponsor for that kind of thing. We just got back from Kenya. I've been able to take some trips with Debbie and Kent and 2 other people, and we've gone now to Egypt, Japan, and Kenya together. And Grandma, who would ever imagine that Grandma would be doing things like that? Not I, but it has been great fun, and I'm so grateful for the privilege of joining. I think one of the greatest blessings lately, well, about 2 years ago, my grandson called up and said, now he's my favorite grandson because they're all my favorite grandsons, whichever one is there. But Adam called up and said, Grandma, I just graduated from college and I got a job in downtown LA. Could I move in with you? And he moved in, and he has been the delight of my life. And I had a whole ripped open part of my heart when we lost David. And I just thought, that's the way it will be. I had always hoped that I would have our son in my old age. And that was not to be, but I have Adam. He's not David, he's very much Adam. But he fills that spot, a true gift. This fellowship gives me everything I need, and I don't even know about it. And when it arrives, I realize it's what I had wanted all along. And for that, I am grateful. Thank you.